we'll go ahead and get started. But I wanted to just share with everyone in our Purple community that everything that's been discussed so far really revolves around our implementation of standards. They provide the framework. It's a common language. We talked about the low-level API. We've talked about the high-level API. But overall, the entire initiative around Purple surrounds itself with our capabilities of leveraging these standards, from the various organizations that are going to be on stage with us in just a moment. So thanks, Olivia, for introducing us. I think we'll cut right to it. And Marianne, if you'll introduce Jason, and then we'll go down the list.
Yes, of course. Okay, so Jason, who is here, is the chair of the Broadband Forum Connected Home Council and co-director of the Broadband User Services Work Area. He's an active contributor to the Purple Marketing Work Group as well. And in his spare time, Jason is the director of technical marketing for Purple member in the QA Coffee company.
In my spare time.
Yeah, spare time. It's written in my notes. Randy, I'll let you introduce Tiago.
Sure. Yeah, Tiago Rodrigues is the president and CEO of the Wireless Broadband Association. Tiago is responsible for leading the overall strategy together with the WBA board and its operational planning for the WBA. He's leading efforts to make Wi-Fi seamless, which is everything that we need, especially with what we're achieving with connectivity with Wi-Fi devices in the home, and also making them secure and operable. So before we move forward, Marianne, if you would introduce Tobin, please.
Yes, Tobin, who is president and CIO of the Connectivity Standards Alliance, lead the Alliance mission with and for its member to simplify and harmonize the Internet of Things through open global standard by creating a place for where companies can work together to create a more connected, accessible, sustainable, and equitable world. His career is rooted in driving human-centric change and enabling purposeful collaboration, and since 2014, Tobin has led the Alliance, which now includes more than 450 member companies in 36 countries across the IoT value chain. Randy, I let you now introduce the last panelist, but not least, of course, Brian.
Sure. Thanks, Marianne. So Brian's with us today, Brian Mecum. He's the vice president for Verizon, which is the largest wireless company in the U.S. So Brian oversees the device technology organization, and he drives the 4G and 5G service ecosystems for future network evolution, while optimizing the existing device performance and architecture, including LTE-M, NB-IoT, and CBRS networks. Brian is responsible for tracking Verizon and industry network technology plans and ensure that the connected objects roadmap across the business channels within Verizon is enabled to support the technical and business needs for the corporation. So thanks again, Brian, for joining us. Thank you to the panelists as well. So Marianne, if you would, please ask the first question.
Yes, so for the first question, I will direct the question to Jason for BBF. So the question, there are 3 sub-questions in my questions. So from a BBF perspective, what do you see as the beneficial outcomes by working jointly and or independently with standards organizations and the Purple Community Open Source Initiative? And then what more should be done? It's sub-questions. What more should be done to further the relevancy of standards, cooperative engagements across organizations with respect to emerging technologies? And last part of the question is there a place for organization organizing a standard certification program that incorporates all the aspects of service offering? And this will be something like a one-stop shop for all things standards.
Well, so, am I here, microphone okay? Good. First of all, I'm glad that Randy's on the monitor here because it would be a little weird with his disembodied voice kind of behind us. So I'll answer the last question first because I think that that's. Has anybody ever seen the XKCD comic, the web comic? Right. There's one that talks about how there's 14 different standards and we need one to unify them all, and then later there's 15 different standards, right? And that's usually how these things work out. And so the way that I've seen things sort of progress, and what I really like about the existence of the Purple Foundation in this context is that we all end up working together without having to do that. Right, and so we work together through joint membership. We work together by direct collaboration, by liaisons, and all these things. And we do that without having to make yet another overarching organization to try to unify everything together. So if that happened, I would always be happy because it means I can do more things in one place when I travel. But so yeah, it's been valuable. Having a Purple Foundation has been extremely valuable because the standards, I've been doing standards with Broadband Forum for 20 years, and the open source community was not what it is now, right? It was basically non-existent, and then it was very, very, niche to certain solutions. And now to have an organization that is dedicated to creating an open source version or implementation of the standards that we're working on, and then feeding that information back into us is really how this has accelerated, especially with USP and TR-181, because now we have people who are actively engaged with the Broadband Forum who are in the middle of developing it and feeding it right back to us with all of the new things that we need to be able to implement, right? And then I feel like that's also the best way for all standards organizations to work together is through that sort of same model where, we're collaborating to know, okay, in your standard you have this, and we need this in that standard. And it's like, oh, well, that's cool because we need this in your standard, and we operate that way.
Yeah, so in a sense, we shorten the cycle of retrieving feedback from the real in-life development of the standard.
Right, and I think that that's probably the best way we can improve, too, is to make sure that we do shorten that cycle to make it a little more agile, right? We don't have to, standards, the standards world, of like the ITUT and stuff that take a very long time to sort of, because they have to, because that's what they're designed to do, right? To be a little bit more agile on things like this, I think, is the best way that we can improve. And on the lighter side of things, I like to try to humanize our industry a lot, right? We have fun doing this, right?
Okay, thank you, Jason. Randy, I hand over to you for the second question.
Sure, thanks. And having been in many meetings with with the Broadband Forum, Jason always brings humor and excitement to these meetings. So he definitely humanizes.
It would be really
So
boring
Tiago,
otherwise.
yeah, exactly. So Tiago, directing the question to you and to others who have some thoughts around this, but specifically is, how do you view the association and how it collaborates with standards organization? In other words, when we think about the competitive landscape, across all of the different standards and the way in which these standards are implemented, do you ever see, or do you see, how competition might get in the way of actually collaborating to drive those standards forward?
Yes, so first of all, hi everyone. I want to thank you for the kind invitation to be here today. So Randy, thank you for inviting me to be here and Purple Foundation. So let me start by sharing that, first of all, standards are needed, at least from a WBA perspective. We are very supportive of the standards. There is always the risk of some overlap of work between different organizations. But one thing that we really need to do is focus more on the collaboration. And to focus on that collaboration, I see two major steps that we need to do. So first step is at a leadership level, from each standardization body, we need to speak to each other more and share more information. And then another big step is the common members, please raise the flag wherever you see some overlap of work, because raising those flags are critical for some alignment. And I can elaborate more later if we have time. I know that lunch is coming right after. If we have time, I can elaborate more how in WBI we try to minimize those overlaps of work and how we partner and collaborate with other bodies.
Yeah, thank you, Tiago. Yeah, given that we do need to collaborate, it's really, something that at least bringing us together in the room today, broadens what we need to accomplish in our long-term objectives. But when it comes to standards, it's always been a little bit of a situation to make sure that we're all attempting and marching down the same path. So good to hear that there's a common vision to incorporate collaboration. So Marianne, turn it back over to you.
Yes, thank you, Randy. For the next question, I will ask to Tobin and Brian, both for different reasons. So for telecommunication and the creation of Matter standard, I will first ask to Tobin. The Connectivity Standards Alliance has gained significant traction in the development and ongoing adoption of the Matter standard for the device connectivity. How do you see how the Matter standard has impacted the telecommunication industry for now and in the future? I think maybe more in the future.
Now too. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me here today as well. A couple of points. Standards are exciting. I was asked on a different panel to explain why standards are sexy. Would you like me to get into that?
They are sexy.
No, good point. But they are very exciting because the work that we all do together and the work that everybody does here in the room touches the lives of everybody on the planet, whether they know it or not, which also carries with it a great responsibility on your part and on our part. I was just briefing another standards organization this morning for a half hour on Matter and collaborating on different ways that we can better address the commercial market, the smart home market as well. So the notion on collaboration is really important. How are we going to affect, and I was going to correct one number. The number of companies in the alliance is actually, it's almost 700 now. Yeah. So if you're wondering if this is a growth area that companies care about, I can assure you that that it is. And so when we talk about how this is going to impact the telecommunications industry in the future, I will echo everything you already heard. It's about defragmentation. The earlier name for Matter was called Project Unity, not to create another standard, but to bring those together. And Matter is not an overnight success. I've been talking to these companies for 12 or 13 years. We've been putting out Zigbee for 20 years. It's only in 1 billion devices, so it's a very small part of the IoT. But all of these, as you know, are systems of systems. And the way that you grow systems of systems is very carefully. And also, but to get to this point where we can then start to see that speed, that strong foundation, that good collaboration are the key parts of that. We are similar to the Wi-Fi Alliance and the Bluetooth SIG historically. We've had a good grouping of specifications and standards, but what we've done recently is similar to prpl, similar to Linux, created an open source reference implementation because it is about speed. And then I think the last thing I would leave you with is this notion that it is not just about incrementally finding a better way to do things. We need that evolution as well. But if we are talking about a system of systems, if we're talking about the Internet of Things, we have to think larger, and we have to think about the processes that we take on to bring those standards into the market, to do that in a way that impacts the telecommunications industry, not 10 years from now, but 5 years from now, which is lightning speed for this market, but that's how we have to think. And this is how the world is evolving and moving. And if we don't think in terms of those timescales, we'll find ourselves really behind the game.
Yep. Can I pile on here?
Yes, but I have an extra question for you. But go ahead.
You want to ask it first?
Yes. Let's. It will help you to complement what you're saying because now Verizon joined the board of the CSA, Connectivity Standards Alliance, and as a telco service provider, how do you plan to leverage on the capabilities of the Matter standard and how it fits with your plans and strategy as it applies to the Purple Foundation and to create the link with Purple Foundation, Wi-Fi and Purple platform initiatives.
Great. Yep. Thanks for the question. All right. So I want to talk to all of you for a second about how standards are to competitors, the kind of a level playing field. So where is the AT&T guy that was here earlier? Right here. What's your name, Jason? Josh. Sorry. Thank you, Josh. Nice to meet you. Normally, Josh and I would be mortal enemies. And AT&T and Verizon is always trying to rip each other's heads off and take each other's subscribers. But I like this Josh guy. Because what Josh said earlier was that this is something we have to all agree to and play nicely in the sandbox together. So it's pretty rare that you see MediaTek and Qualcomm up here being nice and sitting next to each other. Okay, that's rare too. So I think when you see me and Josh, later chatting it up and having a nice time and going to meetings together, that's because this is so important. It's important that we're up here with Tobin, that we're up here not just saying we're going to do it, but actually going faster. I'm with Tobin. We got to go faster, and standards always slow things down. It happens with GSMA, it happens with 3GPP, with all these other groups. And so Verizon is all in. We're going to go faster. We're trying to figure out ways to communicate better. No joke, we actually had, in America, we had to have the Department of Justice attorneys make sure that Josh and I can talk to each other. And so we've checked that box. But the intent is to get this done better and faster, because if we don't, the standards will just be an excuse to hide behind and to slow us down. So Verizon is all in. It sounds like AT&T is as well. When you get the two biggest tier 1 operators in America going in one direction, we just need a few in Europe, and then there's a tipping point, and next thing you know, we're off to the races. Do you want to add anything, Tobin?
I was going to say we're thrilled that Brian and Verizon are on the board, and we look forward to that mental approach and that whole delivery focus on driving the next step for Matter.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe I can add that the CSA4 Matter as a certification program, which is something that delay a bit the delivering of the releases, but actually serve the faster adoption of the product that will be Matter certified from the beginning, from the Alliance. I think that's something that is specific to few standardization bodies and not applicable to all.
It is, and we've also introduced this notion of 2 trains a year, so 2 releases. So we'll do one in the spring and one in the fall. In the next 24 to 36 hours, you'll get a press release about 1.2, Matter 1.2. Hopefully my press folks aren't getting upset with me for saying it. But the whole idea is that whole notion of pace. And really reinforcing the fact that we need to get feature updates out, we need to get bug fixes out. This has really an inevitable momentum behind it, and we need to support that with the right processes. So it is something that we have a lot of good practice in, thankfully.
Thank you, both of you. For the next question, maybe I hand over to you, Randy.
Yeah, and we probably just have enough time for this one question, and then maybe some feedback from the panel as a whole. So, Jason, this one's really directed towards you in terms of how this recent activity, a development initiative that involves the Broadband Forum, the Purple Foundation, and others who are developing the OBUSP agent. I'll let you explain what that is, but the benefit that it brings to the Purple community, and in the future, how we're going to be able to take advantage of the agent and supporting new services such as the ones that are being demonstrated out in the hallway. So just get your thoughts on that and the value proposition.
So I always picture this as a triangle, right? You have standardization, you have open source, and you have testing, right? And those things work together to make a technology successful. So when we decided to do USP TR369, we reflected a little on what happened with TR69 and how no one actually did an open source solution for that was official in any way. And so as a result, you ended up having fragmentation of TR69 open source solutions, right? But again, as I said before, the open source community was very different back then. It was not. I mean, TR69 was released in 2004, so it wasn't even. It's not even the same concept as. So when we went into building TR369, we said, all right, from the get-go, we're going to make sure that we have an open source reference implementation that has several advantages. You know, even if people aren't choosing it as their solution that they want to implement, because there's many vendors out there who still want to build their own agents, right, and make it as part of their solution. Having it as a reference platform that we can test against and make sure that the standard is working and working correctly and that there's no confusion is only enhances the standard's experience, right? It makes the standard more successful. In terms of how it is accelerating what Purple is doing here, I actually love this story because Joao came to us. How many years ago was it? It was only it was right before. It was not that long ago. Time is a blur now because of COVID, right? So it was about 4 years ago. Came to us and said, "Look, we are trying to do this this solution in Purple to finally realize an open CPE architecture that can install applications." And we said, hey, there's already a protocol that exists that would work exactly this way to reveal, to be able to allow apps to reveal their data models and do all this stuff and work together with everything. Why don't we try to use USP to do it? And immediately out of the get-go, we're like, okay, you're right. Let's start the standards process around that. And that experience has been very, very positive and has resulted in us getting to the point where we can do this thing that allows all those people to sit up here on the stage and work it into OBUSP agent as an open source solution so that people know how it is supposed to work.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. The value also provides a way in which we now have the linkage between multiple applications that might be able to share the same data pool. So when we think about the portability of applications across the wireless and wireline domain, no matter what the CPE is, we'll be able to have an application that could compute whatever that capability is of that application and share that data across other services. So it's a huge benefit to the end user community as well as from an operator's perspective and the offering of new services that are advanced and
while making it secure and private and making sure that only people who have access to the things they're supposed to have access to do. But I think the best example of something like that would be like Wi-Fi sensing, right? So you're going to have a Wi-Fi sensing application that is touching the Wi-Fi interface and needing the KPIs from it, while you also have a Wi-Fi management system that's trying to optimize the links and they need access to the same data.
Exactly. So Marianne, I think we're short on time. This might be a good opportunity to ask for some closing comments from the panelists and allow them to break for lunch as soon as we let them. How's that?
Okay. So to all the panel, how do you anticipate the role of standards evolving in the future, especially in light of the technological advancement or changing industry dynamics, and how that fits with Purple open source? Who wants to try to take it?
I can go ahead, no, not an issue. So definitely standards and open source is a big trend. Even in the Alliance, many of the latest standards that we have been developing they have an open source angle, and I think that's very positive. And even with that, I think there is plenty of bandwidth for companies like Verizon and AT&T keep fighting, using the same standards. There is plenty of things that they can do in terms of features, communication, marketing, and many other angles that they can still do whatever fight to get the customers and the subscribers.
We can also say Orange and Dutch Telecom, for instance. Thank you.
Yeah. I would agree. Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration on this stage, but also a lot of room for transparency for companies. Companies spend a lot of money, a lot of time, but most importantly, the resources of their engineering teams to keep track of everything that's going on so that they're not missing the boat on some of the different areas of development. So I think we can do a better job of coordinating and making that more clear for companies that are developing into this space. But at the same time, that transparency is important. The second part is open source. Open source will lead the way in this, and I think that's something that any standards organization needs to embrace fully if they expect this to take off.
So lastly, I'll just say real quick before we head off the line. Can you hear me? All right, thanks, Tobin. So I think what's really important is we think about the end user and stuff just works. That's just what it comes down to. Stuff just has to work. Because whether they're using AT&T as the fixed wireless backhaul or preferred Verizon vendor, right? Whether they're using Verizon, it just comes down to they just want their stuff to work. So whether they have Alexa or Google or they have Siri in their house, doesn't matter. Stuff just needs to work. So I think that's the important aspect of going faster and pushing ourselves to just keep trying and testing and keeping things secure and keeping things just working. That's it. Stuff's just got to work.
Exactly. We have to hide the complexity of our systems. Yes.
I think the speed point needs to be hit home a lot. Like Brian was saying, with standard organizations as a whole, Broadband Forum in particular, is evolving to work more like the way that open source and software works, right? So that we will be faster producing standards as at the breakneck speed at people are developing even the next versions of prpl, right? So we have every 5 seconds David coming in and giving hundreds of new contributions back to the data model, and it's like, whoa, I don't know, that's a lot. But yeah, speed definitely, and then also, it's like I said, I like to hit home the human aspect. It's like at the end of the day, we're all people, especially the standards, the people who are working on the standards and the developers that are having to implement them. It's like we have to remember that they want to see that what they are doing matters. I promise. I only have 2 of those jokes
20
left.
cents right there.
So that they can be involved and find it rewarding.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Yes, actually, we have to keep in mind that standards and LSDOs are contribution-driven, company participation, and only one person can be at the initiative of a liaison with another standard for collaboration. And we had a very interesting meeting between the TSA and the BBF a few months ago. I remember that. And you don't need a full validation of the standardization of the body to go to the neighbor and knock the door and say, hey, can we do things together because we have synergies. I thank you all for your participation to this panel, and thank you, Randy, for the early wake up.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody.